Hi, I'm Janet Gross. Welcome to Coping Today, a place where we talk about mental health and well-being. Today we're going to talk about caring for an aging loved one. It's a beautiful gift and a privilege, but many also know it can be very stressful and fatiguing and just difficult. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to talk about the challenges and struggles that often come with this responsibility. Yeah. It's hard, it's difficult.
It is hard, it is difficult. You know, we think about the blessings of a long life, and a long life is a blessing. It's a wonderful thing to be able to have gone through all of these stages of life and find yourself to be 70, 80, 90, 100, and being there with your family, right? And seeing your loved ones, your children, grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren that you're fortunate enough to get to know. But we all have our limitations as we age and as we get into late adulthood. And perhaps there are things that are compromised, our physical health, our cognitive abilities, and then there are caregivers that now have to step up and be responsible for daily living activities, perhaps bathing, feeding, cooking, even going to the restroom, things of that nature. And it can be very taxing on a primary caregiver. The primary caregiver may be a spouse who is in late adulthood themselves, someone who has limited physical abilities due to their own aches and pains and limited mobility, or maybe even a child who themselves is perhaps limited because it might not be a young person, it might be someone who is in middle or late adulthood themselves who is finding themselves having to care for a parent who is in later adulthood. And so there's a lot of stress that goes along with that, and caregivers are among those unsung heroes that experience some of the most stress in our society, and people really don't pay attention to that, and it's important that we help out with that.
I think that's right, because I think a lot of people say, oh, that's great, she's taking care of her mom, or he's taking care of his wife, or right, you know, whatever it is, she's taking care of her husband, but you're not there 24, right, and they are.
Exactly.
And you don't imagine the things that they might be going through.
You know, and we very superficially, you know, say, what a wonderful thing. Yep. Almost like what we do with our military, right? Mm-hmm. Like what we do with the military, you know, thank you for your service. But what does that service entail? Similarly with a caregiver, oh, that is so sweet, the way they take care of their spouse or the way they take care of their parent. But that's a lot of work. Meeting the daily living needs of another individual every single day for years and years and years is very stressful.
It's a commitment that entails another person's life.
Right.
It's not a job.
Down to the very fundamental needs of hygiene, health, nutrition, everything you can think of that we do for ourselves day in and day out, offering that to someone else. Similarly to someone who is in the early stages of life, when a new primary caregiver, mother, father, is offering that to their newborn child, having to offer those daily needs to someone in late adulthood. And it perhaps is in many ways that much more challenging because, you know, an infant, you know, you have someone who weighs 5 pounds, 10 pounds, however much they weigh, versus someone who has, you know, a lot of, you know, body mass, more so it's a full-grown adult with a mind and independence and sovereignty and their own ideas of how to do things, and respecting that, because you have to think about that piece as well, that, you know, this caregiver is navigating having to be respectful of this adult who has their rights and desires and hopes just as anyone in any stage of development would, and balancing that out, being able to meet the need and be respectful, and then what that entails, and the sacrifice and the work, if you will, that entails for a caregiver.
Especially you've already had for all your life a relationship. If it's a family member, you've had a different relationship.
Right. And then that relationship changes, and so now it's not so much an egalitarian relationship between spouses, or perhaps a hierarchical relationship between parent and child. The script is flipped, and that can be challenging for both parties to have to, perhaps a child of a parent in late adulthood, to be the one to make decisions for them in fundamental areas. And it's something that, if we're blessed to get to late adulthood, that we're probably going to have to find ourselves contending with, and knowing that we can't do it alone. It is difficult to do it alone, that one person can't be the sole caregiver for another whole person, that perhaps we need other family members, community, outside resources to be able to offer that so that we can be there for our loved one and that our loved one can get what they need in that late adulthood stage of life.
And you think about history and how things have changed because the family unit has changed. It's not like everybody's together. And I'm talking like 100 years ago or something,
Right. When you think of pre-agrarian society, or during agrarian societies, we are now a post-agrarian society. You had multi-generational families living in one setting, perhaps rural areas, and they all were there, each with their responsibilities, tending to one another, including those who are in late adulthood. But modern life, with the way people work now, it's taken us in different directions. People don't necessarily live in close communities anymore. You might have members of a family that live in different parts of the country or different parts of the world even. And so that makes it that much more difficult to be able to care for a person who's in late adulthood, and the responsibility often falls on one person. And
there are other relationships in jeopardy.
And then there
sibling relationships or parent-child of the people who aren't, like if two people are taking care of
and
each
the resentment that gets built up with all of that.
Helping,
yeah.
It's really difficult, and a lot of times this will, as we're alluding to, and we're going to be talking about later, so much stress, so much that you might not have an outlet for that, and we want to bring up what the University of Holy Cross has been doing since right when COVID started, really.
Yes. For several years now, for over 3 years, the University of Holy Cross has been offering free telemental health services to anyone in the state of Louisiana who is struggling with any number of mental health issues or relationship issues, including this. If you are someone who is struggling with the stressors of being a primary caregiver, we recognize that that is a significant task that is very overwhelming. And the counselors at the University of Holy Cross are there to listen. You can just pick up that phone, dial the number on the screen, and we'll have the administrative assistant redirect that call to the director, who will assign a counselor in training to you and begin services via the miracle of telehealth and offer that free of charge to anyone
incredible.
In Louisiana.
Yeah, and for any reason.
And for any reason.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be this particular topic, but it is available out there. So a lot of people have been taking advantage of it, and it certainly has helped a lot of people.
Yes, the University of Holy Cross and the Maronites have been offering this service to thousands of people at this point, free of charge.
All over the state.
All over the state, not just within our own New Orleans viewing area, the metropolitan area, but the Louisiana viewing area, the entire state.
Right, okay. All right, great. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk with someone who has firsthand experience in elderly adult caregiving. Stay with us.
When it comes to family, I always do what's best. My parents taught me that. That's why I called A Place for Mom. Their personalized guidance was what I needed to find senior living for Mom. And their advices to families gave us options based on our needs and budget, guiding us to the decision. I never expected a service to make such a difference.
Our service to your family, today.
And welcome back. When an older adult, your parents or spouse or someone else you love needs a lot of care and can't be alone, there are decisions to be made. Joining us to talk about all of that is Michelle Lovett from Audubon Care Homes. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
And I'm sure that you've seen it, where people have tried and they just haven't been able to do it by themselves to take care of a loved one. And so there have to be other arrangements made. And we know nursing homes and facilities and things like that. But there are also specialty, which Audubon Care Homes is. So I guess there's a difference, but it's still the same, where you're helping somebody else take that burden of just the day-to-day off of them, so they don't wreck their relationships and ruin their own health. Really.
Absolutely. Well, as stated before, residential assisted living, which is what Audubon Care Homes does, we offer care for our residents doing things such as activities of daily living, showering, bathing, cooking, transportation. But not just the care, we offer so much more. And like you mentioned, the support to the loved ones, the primary caregivers that have that burden of taking care of their loved one. So now they have the support and the care for their loved one when they have their family member live with us in one of our homes.
And this is small. It's not a lot of people. Explain just briefly.
So our homes are in a residential neighborhood on a residential street for 10 elderly residents living together, and it's like a little family. I kind of think of it as the Golden Girls, you know.
Love that.
It is so much fun. My husband and I just love going and hanging out with our residents, seeing how they're doing. We don't necessarily have to go there and do anything, but we just want to go in, see what they're up to on that specific day. But we just love that it's like a small family rather than something in a large facility that you may see in a nursing home or a large, what we call a big box facility.
You know, and you offer so much to the individual resident, that individual who's in late adulthood, but also to that caregiver that we were speaking of earlier, who has the stress of having to meet that need, along with all of these other responsibilities. Because in addition to being the primary caregiver to someone in late adulthood who has limitations with regard to physical and cognitive needs perhaps, they also have other responsibilities. Maybe they have a job, maybe they have younger children, maybe they have other things, a marriage, a relationship to tend to. And so having to divide themselves, the relief that this must offer to that caregiver. Tell us more about that.
So more often I have a stressed daughter, or we call her daughter Judy, come in and take a tour, and you know, she just looks exhausted, you know, because she's been doing a lot of shift work or keeping up with some caregivers that come into their home that maybe not show up, so they have to fill in that need. And whenever they come to us, they see the house, they see how happy the residents are, the relief immediately is taken off. You know, they just feel that they are going to make a good decision for their parent or their loved one, and having the right kind of care for them, and they just now can enjoy their time with their loved one rather than the stress of being that primary caregiver is now no longer an issue. So now they can just simply come enjoy their loved one's time and their visits, maybe, you know, take them for a walk, rather than coming there to their home or wherever they're living and have to do their medications, making sure that they're showering and eating. Now they can just simply enjoy their loved one's time. So.
That's got to take a lot of guilt too. I mean,
Absolutely.
Guilt off of it that I should be taking care of, you know, or whoever it is, or I'm not doing a good job.
Caregiver guilt is very common. You know, we always want to do the best for, you know, our parent. They raised us. We want to make sure that we give them the best possible care. But if you're making the right choices for them, giving them a place that they can get their needs met, and the support that they need as a primary caregiver, it's a slam dunk. It's a great thing for everybody in the family.
Because often I think there can be, and at first hand, not with my parents, but I saw my mom taking care of my grandparents, and there is sometimes resentment, and there is a little bit of, you know, Alzheimer in the beginning, and anger, you know, just from my grandmother who didn't understand.
Right.
You know?
And I see this all the time. I see that the strain, the resentment in the relationship, you know, the family member says, well, you know, they're pretty demanding in what they need, or they're just not very happy. And whenever they move their loved one into one of our homes, all that kind of goes away. And now they see that their loved one isn't exactly what they may have thought they were needing. You know, they're no longer depressed. They're socializing with their, you know, roommates per se, and they're much happier, and they're like, wow, my mom or dad is a completely different person. It's because now that stress of being the primary caregiver or your child being your primary decision maker is now no longer an issue, and they can just enjoy life.
And this is just what's popping into my mind as I hear you talk about this, that I wonder if for that primary caregiver, when they are caregiving for their loved one, they're bathing them, they're taking them to the restroom, they're feeding them, and so they're just getting tasks done, and they're not really engaging in a meaningful way, whereas when they are in this type of residential facility, that they're able to have those daily needs met by someone else, and when they are with them, when they go to visit, when they take them to go do something, they're in relationship, they're engaging in relationship and not meeting daily basic needs.
Right, and that it makes a huge difference in that relationship, and you just kind of see them flourish and kind of see the relationship change. And that's really what it's all about for us, is we want to make sure that their loved ones' needs are met, but also they are happy in their decision that they sought the right care for their loved one. We just really enjoy everything that we do at Audubon Care Homes. We have family day parties, and the families get to come and, for Christmas, kind of do things with them that they weren't able to do before because they were just completely stressed. Or have a birthday party for them. Have them,
Come
cake
over
and
for coffee.
come over for coffee. Things that they were never able to do before, they can now enjoy, the golden years of their loved one.
I think about this is some people don't see it as a step back toward independence almost, where you are by yourself. You're in your own room. No, your daughter, your son isn't coming in to try and help you, or whatever. So you really have your own space, and you can be friends again. You can be mom again or dad again.
Yes. Yeah, having their independence. We love to give them some sort of independence. We let them make decisions on what kind of drink they would like to have with their lunch today. Some things that maybe the loved one said, you can't have any sugar in your tea today. And if they want to have a little bit of sugar, let them enjoy it. Let them enjoy their golden years. Let them have that pizza. And the family is just kind of making those decisions for them. Now the resident or the senior now has some sort of independence because they can make their own decisions, or at least feel like they are, rather than their primary caregiver, their loved one, doing it for them.
Sure, that's what an interesting pattern of behavior to fall into, right? That oftentimes children say, no, you have your diabetes, you can't have that sugar, whereas this person, whether they're 80, 85, 90, 95, they're independent, sovereign adults who can make certain decisions for themselves. And if they want sugar in their coffee, they can have sugar in their coffee.
Let them have sugar in their coffee. Let them, come to the table at a leisure time and have breakfast. Let them, say, I would like to go into my room and watch a movie, or I want to go play cards with my friends at the dining room table. All these type of things that they can do in our homes with a group of people that they can identify with. They're people that, are in the same stage of life as they are, and they feel that they're in the right place, as opposed to being at home. Oh, now she's coming over and telling me I have to eat this, or questioning me, did you eat your meals? Did you take your medication? Now they can do that in the privacy of what they think is their own home sometimes.
It's often easy to get upset. What did you do with that? I gave that to you. What did you do with that thing? Where because they're off doing, the caregiver's off doing something else, and they come back and it's gone. You don't know what happened, and those things, when it's in the hands of somebody who it's their job and they don't have to be there 24.
Right. And our caregivers are trained to care for those with dementia or memory loss. And sometimes the primary caregiver, the son, the daughter, doesn't necessarily know how to deal with those changes, those cognitive changes. And so whenever our residents may say, I'm going to go see Bill, to their husband that may be deceased, and the daughter or son might have been, Mom, Dad, he's been deceased, for 5 years. Instead, we do a different approach, because we understand that they don't understand that someone is no longer living, or no longer their neighbor, or living in the same house. And so it's hard for the family members to see those changes and know how to effectively care for them.
Right. And that's a big difference, where you have someone who is not aware of these things, a lay person, a child who, why would they know these things? They're not trained. But you have people who are aware of this and are able to offer that very special care to someone who is struggling with memory and cognitive issues.
Right.
I have another question with regard to the social aspect. When you have these 10 residents together living day to day, what does that start to look like? The relationships that are formed, the social aspect.
Oh, they're the best of friends. They, the ones that do have a shared room with their roommate, they kind of become sisters. They look out for each other. The socialization now is somewhat of like the Golden Girls. It's somebody that says hello to them. How are you doing today? She doesn't necessarily want to have that bread with her meal today. She'll tell the caregivers, because they know that person so well. But the smiles and everything that comes with the socialization, and no longer the isolation, especially what we saw with the pandemic. Now they're able to socialize, make friends, and be happy in their home.
So they really get a group of friends.
They get a group of friends.
And like we were saying, like those multi things in college, where you kind of go with those little buildings that they build now for kids who go away to college.
Right.
So you go and you may have like 6 rooms of people, but you just have the same kitchen, and they're not your friends, but
Right.
now you get to know them.
Right.
You get to know them. You get to know, what their
relatives.
likes are, what their relatives are, and now their relatives become their family. They all. How are you doing today, Rose? And the families just really love that they see that their loved ones are now having those friends later in life, and when they thought maybe that wouldn't have been possible. So
It's kind of like they get to be their own person again.
Right.
Maybe. And it's great for the people who can take care. I'm not saying anything about the people who take care of their loved ones, because that's beautiful too.
It's a
if
hard
you can make it
job.
work, but
Yep.
it is hard.
it is hard
And
stressful.
options.
There are options.
Good options.
There's good options out there. It's scary making that decision for your loved one. You hear of the horror stories with maybe nursing homes, and maybe nursing homes isn't what's appropriate for your loved one. Maybe they just need a little bit of extra care doing those activities of daily living. And in our homes, it's not the big campus that you walk into or a receptionist that you have to check in. You're just basically going to visit your mom or dad in another home rather than a facility, and that makes a difference.
It is great that there are so many options now, and this is a beautiful one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a great option for those families that that do need it. So.
Okay. Michelle Lovett, thank you so much
Thank you for
talking
having
to
me.
us and being here and giving details about this option, which is a beautiful thing.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back in just a minute, so stay with us.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving.
And we're back talking about elderly caregiving and so many issues that go along with the choices people make. We're talking about guilt. We've talked about it, guilt and apprehension. It's my mom or my dad, and I don't want them to feel like I left them when they cared for me. All the things that you face when you have that decision to make when they can't be alone.
Right. And we don't want people to abandon loved ones. We don't want people to put aside or cast aside their spouse or their parent when things are difficult and when they are struggling cognitively or with memory issues or with health or meeting their own daily needs. Right. That being said, it's important to also recognize that it is a big ask and a big task for a primary caregiver, that one person can't go at it alone, and that there might be a time, because the caregiver themselves perhaps is limited with what they're able to offer, that they get additional resources. And perhaps a residential home such as this, that's very individualized care, a good ratio of 3 to 1, and with a social aspect to it that just might be beneficial to the loved one. It's a balance between meeting the needs of the individual in late adulthood and reducing some of that stress from the caregiver.
Because you've heard the stories where somebody says, "Don't ever put me in a home. I want you to take care of me. Don't ever farm me out or anything like that." And you understand that, but sometimes you can't. It's not a good life for either of you. And I guess that's such a hard decision. I would think that would weigh on you emotionally, mentally. It would affect your well-being as that decision maker.
Right, and because we unfortunately have heard of those situations where, people in late adulthood aren't properly cared for in certain facilities. We know that has happened in the past. And so people are apprehensive, understandably so. I too am apprehensive.
Yep.
With regard to the realities of caregivers, there are certain caregivers that can no longer be an effective caregiver for an array of reasons. And in those instances, having to make difficult decisions, that it might be better in the caregiver's interest and in the individual that's being cared for to be in a facility after having researched it and found that this is something that could be beneficial, so that those daily living activities can be met, that they're bathed properly, that they're able to go to the bathroom, that they're able to be fed and thrive with other residents and develop relationships. And the caregiver is no longer straddled with the stress of having to be responsible for another person's body and their daily needs.
And I think giving that person, if it's possible, a say in that. Let's go see a couple. You pick the one that you like.
Right.
Let's go look at this. Let's see this
Right.
kind. I think that's so smart.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go, you have some tips?
Yes, it's important for caregivers to know that they can't go at this alone. Don't go at it alone, that there are resources out there, but inform yourself. Inform yourself as to the different types of options and resources that are there for caregivers and their loved ones. Own what you're feeling. You're not a horrible person if you're feeling overwhelmed and that you're stressed out, because it is a big toll. Don't neglect yourself. It's important to take care of yourself and get that respite. And maybe that respite might entail having to look into a residential facility or some other type of resource to help you out.
Right.
Protect your finances, because caring for a loved one can really have a financial impact. Loss of income if you're no longer able to work full time, because the demands of caregiving for someone limits generating revenue, but then it costs money to provide these types of services
Very
to someone.
expensive,
Ask your employer for what you need. Let the employer know, listen, I'm going through this. Maybe you can qualify for the FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, because it's not just about children, it's about caregiving for members of your family, and parents and spouses are members of your family for which you could potentially qualify, and employers could be somewhat accommodating. And utilize those community supports, and different resources in our area are here, and so just look into it.
Yeah, check it out first, and then you can help yourself later.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dr. Royce Delgado, for talking with us and talking things through. And we also want to thank our guest, Michelle Lovett, and of course, your colleagues at the University of Holy Cross for helping us. And thank you for watching and being a part of Coping Today.